Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Zachary had always known he wasn't the kind of man who made someone's heart race. At 38, a respected aerospace engineer at a reputable company, he was methodical, calm, the type who preferred solving problems with logic rather than drama. Lillian, his wife, was his complete opposite. At 35, she was the marketing director at a prestigious agency, pure fire, ambitious, eloquent, always the center of attention wherever she went. When they'd married 11 years ago, Zachary had thought their differences complemented each other. He brought stability, she brought passion. For years, it had worked, or at least that's what he'd believed. From the outside, their life looked enviable. They lived in a spacious house in a prosperous suburb, with a well-kept garden and 2 garage spots. Zachary earned well, Lillian earned even more. They traveled, dined at expensive restaurants, attended social events where Lillian shone and Zachary watched proudly. They didn't have children, a mutual decision made years ago, when both were focused on building solid careers. Maybe later, Lillian always said, and Zachary agreed without question. But in the past 6 months, something had changed. Lillian was staying late at work, coming home too exhausted for the easy conversations they used to share. She spent hours on her phone, always with a ready excuse, a demanding client, an urgent campaign, last-minute meetings. Zachary noticed, of course, but chose to believe her. Trust was the foundation of any marriage, he reminded himself. Questioning would mean admitting something was wrong, and he wasn't ready for that. There had been odd little details too, bank statements that didn't add up, purchases from stores Lillian never shopped at, expensive dinners she vaguely explained as networking. Zachary filed those concerns away in the back of his mind, not wanting to seem controlling or suspicious. Zachary's birthday arrived on a rainy Friday in October. The night before, he'd tried to talk to Lillian about what Christian had revealed. "We need to talk." In private, before anything else, he'd said calmly. But Lillian had brushed him off irritably. "I don't have time for your paranoia right now. I'm organizing your party, by the way. A little gratitude would be nice." She insisted on doing something special. She'd already reserved a table at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, invited close friends, some of Zachary's co-workers, even his boss. "You deserve to be celebrated," she'd said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Zachary asked to cancel it, preferring something intimate, but Lillian had already arranged everything and refused. He realized then that she wanted the stage, the public performance of the devoted wife. Well, she'd have her stage. The restaurant was impeccable, soft lighting, subtle background music, tables draped in spotless white linens. About 15 people showed up, filling 2 long tables joined together in the center of the dining room. Lillian was radiant, dressed in an elegant black ensemble, laughing loudly, steering the narrative of the evening as she always did. Zachary smiled politely, thanked everyone for their wishes, accepted hugs. Outwardly, everything seemed perfect. Inside, he felt a strange weight in his chest, anxiety he couldn't quite name. The night wore on with lively conversation, wine flowing, plates of pasta and risotto being served. Zachary was in the middle of a story about a recent work project when Lillian abruptly cut him off. "Zachary, you always do this," she said, her voice loud enough to silence every other conversation. The whole room seemed to go quiet. He blinked, confused. "Do what?" he asked calmly. Lillian rolled her eyes, her face tightening with impatience. "Talk about work as if anyone actually cares. No one here wants to hear about calculations and technical specs." Embarrassment settled in. Some guests looked away, others pretended to check their phones. Zachary's boss cleared his throat uncomfortably. Zachary forced a light laugh, trying to ease the tension. "Sorry, I guess I got carried away." But Lillian didn't stop. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, and stared at him with something close to disdain. "You know what your problem is, Zachary?" She didn't wait for an answer. "You'll never be good enough for me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Zachary felt dozens of eyes fixed on him, waiting for a reaction: anger, hurt, humiliation. Instead, he felt an odd calm settle over him. Maybe it was the relief of finally having confirmation of what he'd already suspected. Maybe it was the weight of recent weeks being validated. He picked up his napkin, wiped his lips slowly, and looked straight at Lillian. Then he smiled, not a forced or broken smile, but a genuine, almost serene one. "I know," Zachary said calmly. "Christian told me the same thing yesterday." The change in Lillian's expression was instant. Her arrogance vanished, replaced by sheer shock. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Someone at the table dropped a fork, the clatter echoing in the stunned silence. Zachary continued, his voice clear and steady. "Actually, Christian and I had a pretty long conversation. He was surprised to learn you're married. Apparently, you told him you'd been divorced for 2 years. Creative, wasn't it? He reached out to me completely devastated, crying on the phone. Said he never would have gotten involved if he'd known the truth. That he was raised to respect marriages, that he feels dirty for being part of this without realizing." Poor guy was genuinely remorseful. Lillian turned pale. Her hands, once gesturing confidently, now trembled slightly on the table. "Zachary, what are you talking about? Are you drunk?" But her voice was thin, brittle. He shook his head. "No, Lillian. I'm completely sober. For the first time in months, actually." He turned to the guests, who were watching the scene as if it were a movie. "Christian is her personal trainer. They met 3 times a week at the gym. At least, that's what she claimed. Turns out, working out was just one of their activities." Lillian tried to stand, but Zachary kept going, his voice never rising, never wavering. 5 days ago, Christian contacted me. He was confused because he found photos from our wedding in Lillian's glove compartment. When he confronted her, she made up a story about them being old photos from before the divorce. But Christian isn't stupid. He looked me up online, found my profile, messaged me. And we talked. Lillian's eyes filled with tears, but Zachary knew they weren't from regret. They were from panic, from suppressed rage, from public humiliation. She opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off. "Christian didn't know anything, Lillian. He really thought you two had something special." Poor guy was heartbroken when he learned the truth. "Just like I was, when I realized you'd been lying to me for months." One of Lillian's friends tried to intervene, murmuring something about maybe discussing this privately, but Zachary ignored her. His eyes stayed locked on his wife. "I recorded it all. Every word Christian said. Every detail of your meetings. The cheap hotels where you claimed to be at client meetings. The Saturday afternoons when you said you were at the spa. He told me everything, Lillian. And you know the funniest part? He felt used too. Because you promised him you'd leave your controlling ex-husband and start a new life together." Another lie. Lillian finally found her voice, though it came out as a rasp. "You don't know anything. Christian's lying to save himself." Zachary laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Of course. That's why he showed me the messages. The photos? The receipts for gifts you bought him with our joint credit card?" He pulled his phone from his pocket and set it on the table. "It's all here. I can show everyone if you'd like. Or we can at least keep a little dignity. But just so you know, my lawyer already has copies of everything. And while adultery won't leave you with nothing, this evidence is going to make things a lot more complicated for you in the divorce." Lillian's tears now streamed freely, smudging her carefully applied makeup. She looked around the table, searching for allies, but found only shocked, uneasy faces, some even judging. "You set this up," she whispered, her voice laced with venom. You humiliated me on purpose in front of everyone. Zachary tilted his head. No, Lillian. You humiliated yourself when you shouted to an entire restaurant that I'd never be good enough. I just gave context. Someone flagged down the waiter, asking for the check. The birthday party had ended abruptly and disastrously. Guests began standing, murmuring polite excuses, avoiding Lillian's gaze. Zachary's boss squeezed his shoulder as he passed, a silent gesture of support. Within minutes, only Zachary and Lillian remained seated, separated by untouched plates of food and a distance neither could cross anymore. Why did you do this? Lillian asked, her voice hoarse. Zachary picked up his water glass, took a slow sip before answering. Because you deserve to feel even a fraction of what I felt when I found out. And because I wanted everyone who always thought you were perfect to see who you really are. He stood, tossed some bills on the table to cover the check, and grabbed his coat. Oh, and one last thing. You're pregnant, aren't you? Lillian froze, eyes wide. How did you? Zachary sighed. I found the pregnancy test in the bathroom trash a few weeks ago. You hid it, probably because you weren't sure who the father was, or exactly when it happened. Funny, I wasn't even angry about that. I was relieved. Because now I know our decision not to have kids was the best thing we ever did together. Not because of our careers, but because you were never truly committed to this marriage. He started to walk away but paused, turning back one last time. Christian knows about the pregnancy too, by the way. I told him this morning. He's going to demand a paternity test, just like I am. So good luck explaining that to whoever the father is, assuming you even know. With that, Zachary left the restaurant, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the cold marble as Lillian sat alone, surrounded by the wreckage of the life she herself had set on fire. The days that followed were an avalanche of revelations. Zachary hired a divorce attorney he'd quietly consulted the week before. Christian also sought legal counsel, realizing he'd been manipulated and deceived in ways he was still processing. The two men, unlikely allies in this disaster, shared information, documents, evidence. There was no friendship between them, only mutual understanding. They'd both been victims of the same person. Lillian tried damage control. She called Zachary dozens of times, leaving messages that alternated between emotional pleas and veiled threats. He didn't respond to any. She messaged mutual friends, trying to shape the narrative, painting herself as the victim of a controlling, neglectful husband. But the truth had already spread. Party guests told others, and in a community where reputation was currency, Lillian watched hers plummet quickly. The paternity test was scheduled after the first trimester. Zachary had no illusions. He knew there was a chance the child was his, but something deep inside told him it wasn't. Lillian had changed too much in recent months, pulled away too far. And if the child was Christian's? Well, that would simplify a lot of legal complications. Christian, meanwhile, was devastated. He genuinely believed Lillian was a divorced woman looking for a fresh start. He'd fallen in love, planned a future, maybe even a family. Discovering it was all a lie, that he'd been just a distraction, a temporary trophy to feed someone's ego, left him shattered. But also furious enough to cooperate fully with Zachary, providing every sordid detail of his affair with Lillian. Meanwhile, Zachary focused on untangling their finances. They had joint accounts, shared investments, the house they'd bought together 5 years earlier. Zachary's attorney was meticulous, mapping every asset, every debt. Surprisingly, they discovered Lillian had made significant withdrawals from their savings account over the past 4 months, totaling nearly $30,000. When pressed, she claimed unreimbursed work expenses. But bank records showed transactions at men's clothing stores, jewelry shops, romantic restaurants. She'd been funding her affair with Christian, buying his attention with marital money. 3 weeks after the disastrous dinner, Zachary was sitting in his home office reviewing divorce papers when he got a call from Christian. They hadn't spoken since their initial exchange of information, and the other man's voice sounded strange. "Zachary? I need to tell you something." A long pause followed. "Lillian came to me yesterday. She begged me to claim paternity, no matter what the test says. Offered me money, a lot of money. Said it'd be worth my while if I said the child was mine." Zachary felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't surprise, really, but the cold calculation of it still hit him hard. "And did you agree?" Christian let out a bitter laugh. "Of course not. I'm not going to lie about something like that. If the kid's mine, I'll take responsibility. But I won't be manipulated again." He sighed heavily. "She's desperate, Zachary. I think she's finally realized she's lost everything, you, her reputation, the life she had. And now she's trying to salvage whatever she can." Zachary thanked him for the call and hung up, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that he was exiting this marriage with his integrity intact. Sadness because, deep down, a small part of him still remembered the woman he'd fallen in love with 11 years ago. But that woman, if she'd ever truly existed, had disappeared long ago. The divorce moved quickly, with no significant pushback from Lillian. She knew she had no moral ground to stand on. The asset division was relatively clean, each kept their own car, individual accounts were separated, and the house was put up for sale. The $30,000 she'd siphoned off became a bargaining point, with Zachary agreeing not to press criminal charges in exchange for Lillian waiving any claim to future investments or alimony. The paternity test results arrived on a sunny January afternoon, 4 months after the dinner that changed everything. Zachary was in his new place, a smaller but comfortable apartment across town, when he got the email. He opened the document, read the first line, and felt an enormous weight lift from his shoulders. Probability of paternity, 0%. The child wasn't his. Christian got different results. The child was his, with 99.9% certainty. Zachary learned this through his lawyer, who casually mentioned that Christian was now pursuing custody arrangements and parental responsibilities. Zachary felt no anger or envy. He felt only quiet gratitude that he'd escaped a permanent connection to someone who had betrayed him so thoroughly. Lillian vanished from social media, unthinkable for someone who used to document every meal, every trip, every performative moment of happiness. Mutual friends reported she was staying with a cousin in another state, trying to start over, far from the scandal. Christian, meanwhile, was facing the reality of becoming a father to a child whose very conception was stained by lies. He hired a lawyer to establish clear custody and child support terms, but Zachary knew he was still processing everything: the love he'd felt, the betrayal he'd suffered, the innocent child caught in the middle. 6 months after the restaurant confrontation, Zachary was at a coffee shop near work, grabbing a coffee before an important meeting. He'd recently been promoted, a recognition for years of consistent work. His life was finding a new rhythm: engaging work, some casual dates that didn't lead anywhere but were pleasant, friends who'd stood by him through the storm. He was okay. Not explosively happy, but content, stable. That's when he saw her. Lillian was sitting alone at a corner table, staring blankly into a cup of tea. She looked different: shorter hair, no makeup, simple clothes. Her pregnant belly was clearly visible beneath a loose sweater. She looked up and saw him, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Zachary could have walked out, pretended not to see her. But something in him, curiosity, closure, or maybe just the need to finally close this chapter, made him walk over to her table. "Lillian," he said calmly. She nodded, her voice weak. "Zachary." He didn't sit, just stood there holding his coffee cup. "How are you?" She gave a humorless laugh. "Honestly? Terrible. But I guess that's what I deserve." Zachary didn't disagree. "And the baby?" Lillian placed a hand on her stomach. "Healthy. Christian's getting shared custody." He's been more generous than I deserved. An uncomfortable silence followed. Then she looked up at him, eyes red. I'm sorry, Zachary. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am. I ruined everything. I had a good man, a good life, and I threw it all away because I don't know. Because I was selfish and stupid and thought I deserved more. Zachary took a deep breath. You're right. It doesn't change anything. But I accept your apology, for what it's worth. He took a sip of coffee. I truly hope you find what you're looking for, Lillian. I just hope it doesn't cost anyone else their life in the process. He turned to leave, but she called his name once more. Have you forgiven me? Zachary paused, thought for a moment. No. And I might never fully forgive you. But I've let you go. And that's the best I can offer. With that, he left the cafe, the afternoon sun warming his face as he walked back to the office. He didn't look back. There was no reason to. The past was where it belonged, behind him, a lesson learned, a wound slowly healing. And for the first time in nearly a year, Zachary felt something close to peace. He'd been good enough, for himself, for his integrity, for the life he was building now. And if Lillian never saw that, the problem had always been hers, never his. Life went on. Christian would raise his child with all the complications that came with it, but with honesty this time. Lillian would rebuild whatever she could from the wreckage she'd created. And Zachary? Zachary simply kept moving forward, one step at a time, knowing he deserved his own kindness, even when others couldn't recognize it. And in the end, that was enough. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.